Today we announced plans to end greyhound racing in New Zealand.
And they chase, secure a second out of the boxes, first away on stripe, now securing rails through.
The death of dog racing in New Zealand appears imminent.
This is not a decision that is taken lightly, but is ultimately driven by protecting the welfare of racing dogs.
The last official greyhound race will be July next year, if not sooner. There have been multiple critical reviews of the sport. Politically, banning it was a popular call to make.
Hey everyone, I'm here with Donald, who is very pleased that we are ending greyhound racing in New Zealand.
But the Herald has discovered the greyhound racing industry here is not going to just roll over. A confidential plan sent to trainers and obtained by the Herald outlines how the industry is gearing up for a fight.
So that's the aim of the game, is it, to overturn the ban?
So we're looking to put forward a spirited defence of our position through the select committee process, and clearly we're taking advice around that.
Edward Rennell is the CEO of Greyhound Racing New Zealand.
100% we believe the decision is wrong, and we will certainly be lobbying to try and get the decision reversed.
The confidential notes show the industry plans a lobbying strategy and campaign to change the focus on injuries. Rennell says key to this will be rallying the greyhound army to correct misinformation.
What is the misinformation that's being spread about greyhound racing?
I think there's numerous misinformation out there. I think it's also there's no perspective around it. I think greyhound racing has made huge progress and continues to do everything it can to improve the position.
Racing Minister Winston Peters said the plan to ban the sport was due to the unacceptably high injury rates.
Our injury rate, which was deemed to be unacceptable by the Minister, compares favourably with Australian jurisdictions, and at no point have we been advised what is an unacceptable rate.
In his 8-point plan sent to industry participants, Rennell says the proposed ban is not based on substantive evidence, is politically driven and manifestly unfair.
We have the Prime Minister talking about a growth strategy, yet he's quite prepared to look at an industry, compromising or sacrificing an industry that delivers 1,054 jobs and 164 million to the economy each year. So, the decision, I believe, is inconsistent with that. We've got a government looking at live exports, yet greyhound racing is deemed unsatisfactory. I think there are inconsistencies politically with this decision.
Do you think Prime Minister Chris Luxon and the Racing Minister Winston Peters have been manifestly unfair?
Look, I don't know. They would have, we haven't spoken to them, so we don't know their rationale.
Legal action is also being considered. The industry here is investigating how New South Wales successfully overturned plans to ban the sport there in 2016 to see if the argument could be replicated here.
Are you taking legal advice on that?
Yeah, we're certainly reviewing what happened in New South Wales and taking advice from our New South Wales counterparts. I don't believe the government has fully considered the implications of the decision and the cost of closure.
And the industry hopes to further bolster its argument to keep racing by comparing the dogs to the horses.
Obviously be comparing greyhound racing injuries as much as you can against other racing codes like harness racing. How do you plan to do that?
Well, I think it's very hard because there's a lot more transparency around our reporting of injuries. But what I would say is the level of euthanasias in greyhound racing is lower than the euthanasia, racing euthanasia rate in the equine codes. Now, I'm not saying their rate's unacceptable, but I don't believe ours is either.
What about injuries? Are more horses injured than greyhounds?
I would argue a lot of them are not reported.
The plan to reverse the ban also talks about new initiatives to try and further improve injury rates of racing dogs.
But isn't it too late for that, Edward?
No. If we can reduce injuries, whether we're here for another 18 months or another 5 years, we will do that.
They've had more than a decade to prioritise and implement animal welfare improvements, and they have failed. So any new animal welfare measures are just too little too late.
Emma Brodie works for the animal rights group SAFE and says the last-ditch attempt by industry to save the sport is desperate.
And I think that this goes to show that the industry is acting in its own interests rather than those of the dogs. They should be winding down races now and prioritising the welfare of the dogs that need to be rehabilitated and rehomed.
The industry would argue, however, that they make millions of dollars for the economy, that people's livelihoods are at risk. Doesn't that count for something?
Well, the government has implemented a 20-month phase-out period for the industry to make arrangements, but ultimately this decision reflects a social consensus that greyhound racing isn't compatible with the values and expectations of New Zealand society. We are moving away from this antiquated sport.
Her organisation regularly publicises greyhound racing injury statistics and denies being misleading.
Are you spreading misinformation about the industry?
We're not. All the data that we published, we sourced from Greyhound Racing New Zealand directly.
We are averaging at just under the 7 mark, 7 per 1,000 starters. So that means 99.3% of starters are not incurring a significant injury when they race. Last year we had 9 euthanasias and 4 sudden deaths out of in excess of 37,000 starters. So I just want to make that point so there's perspective around our injury rate.
But Brodie believes any ongoing justifications to save the sport are doomed.
We think that any attempts to overturn this decision goes against the clear will of the public and the cross-party consensus that this ban is the right decision.